As I've mentioned on the daily objective, we are at a new cycle where nothing really happens. We are just waiting for stuff to happen. So today we're not really. Today it's gonna be a bunch of this might happen and maybe, and if it goes well, and we'll have to see. Basically, every topic will also go back to sort of TRS classic standard where we had three topics, and we're gonna cover all of them. And yeah, most of these topics might become a bigger show later in this week or in a week or so. But today it's gonna be a bit. It's gonna be also a bit more interactive. If people want to talk in the chat, I might look at the chat more. Since again, there is not that much to sort of really talk about on each topic because it's a lot of maybes. So at first we're gonna cover Syria again. We haven't covered it in a bit. Something that has been happening is there have been clashes, particularly around some parts of Damascus or sort of cities south of Damascus, specifically with Druze communities, clashes between the Druze militias and HTS. Now, Israel or sort of Netanyahu has promised that if something happens, if something starts happening to them, he's willing to basically support them to come in and defend them, defend the Druze communities, and has ordered the IDF to basically get ready for some possible incursion into Syria. Now, Israel is already sort of controlling parts of Syria, specifically just the border parts, the sort of the parts that used to be basically I'm not sure if the right word is the ceasefire line, but basically the sort of the agreement between Golan Heights and the Syrian part that was between Israel and Assad's regime after the basically the Yom Kippur War. And Israel is now controlling that, and there is some question about that they might go further. So that's the first topic. The second topic, we're gonna go back to the possible deal on Gaza or possible invasion or reinvasion, or I think there was a specific concept I've seen. Oh, offensive being renewed is what I've seen a lot in Gaza, possibly even harsher than it was. So that could be interesting. We're gonna cover that in the second topic. And then a third interesting topic is Israeli-Russian relations. Will it mostly relates to Syria, but there's a few other things that I think might be interesting to discuss. Again, it's gonna be a bunch of maybes because we'll see in the specifically in the upcoming days and weeks how this situation will develop. But let's start with Syria. So there's been an more open uprisings in the southern suburbs of Damascus, basically, specifically the Druze communities. There are also Christians in those communities, specifically the city of Yaramana. And as I've said, there might be possible Israeli operation. So, Marco, we don't know if anything will happen, but so far, what do you make of I think the sort of the biggest question, or at least something I've seen people saying, is trying to compare Israel to Russia. Basically, we are just there to protect the ethnic communities. I think in the article I've read, they also Israel referred to this as a special military operation, which I don't think you are sort of helping yourself by doing that. I do think there is a difference, but what do you make of those comparisons, or what do you make even of the plan for Israel to possibly go further into Syria?
Well, before we start analyzing what's happening now, we have to remember why are we in the situation. When the Hamas-Israel war escalated to include Hezbollah, effectively Iran, the destabilizing power in the Middle East, has been kind of curtailed. Has found itself without two of the major agent proxies that they use to cause all sorts of trouble. And after especially the what they call the pager attack and the killing of Nasrallah, Hezbollah found itself really on the back foot and unexpectedly. We suddenly realized the level of preparedness that Israel had in order to deal with Hezbollah itself. But whatever the reason, Hezbollah has been effectively more or less neutralized. Certainly, its ability to wage war against Israel has been seriously curtailed. And then Iran itself was hit by a few strikes from Israel following the second ballistic missile attack, which meant that Iran itself is on the back foot. Has lost its ability to attack Israel directly. It's lost its access to its proxies. And then this in itself caused the fall of Assad, um, compounded by the fact that Russia, which was supporting Assad, is being busy fighting the Ukrainians. So this whole situation allowed for a sort of vacuum and weakness in Syria, which has allowed the forces of HTS, let's not forget former jihadis, to take power and you know so far playing the good guys. Now,
Well, I just clarify, former Al Qaeda, possibly still jihadists. Just to
well,
the big question is sort of what they apparently they've just appointed a woman into the cabinet, so I'd like to congratulate them
sure,
on that.
because these people don't know how to play the media in the West, do they? Anyway, the issue here now that we have different groups in Syria who are pretending to get along well, and set new regional powers in the Middle East are trying to take over and control Syria because clearly it's a strategic position. So we've seen Turkey trying to take over or wipe out the PKK. However, something unusual has happened just in a couple of days ago. The PKK decided to disband. The PKK decided to stop fighting Turkey, which means that perhaps Turkey is trying to exert more power in Syria. It's trying to control the new government. And this causes a problem for Israel. Israel has got a big Druze population. As you mentioned, they taken over up to Mount Hebron following the Syrian revolution, if you like. So the last thing that Netanyahu needs at this point, and Israel needs at this point, is a seriously anti-Israel Turkey to have more ability to influence the area. So the help of the Druze. Bear in mind that there are about 150,000 Druze living in Israel already. The population of the Druze are being seen by Israel as allies, and having allies in Syria right now, it's a good thing. However, um, if the official government of Syria is now attacking the Druze, or the Druze are trying to position themselves or perhaps give themselves some sort of autonomy, this might be a problem for Israel's influence in Syria. So we might find ourselves with a Turkish backed Syria, which faces opposite Israel directly. Let's not forget there is a big border in the south of Syria on the border with Israel. So the interface between the two will be significant.
Yeah, I mean, Marco mentioned the PKK there. And I know we're not here specifically to talk about that, but in refreshing my memory about them, I was reading about how they've adopted feminism and social justice in recent times in order to curry their favor with the West in terms of their Kurdish cause. And of course, maybe HTS is taking a leaf out of their playbook when it comes to appointing a prominent woman to do something similar. You never really know, do you? I mean, what we've got here is after any kind of violent, sudden revolution, whatever the cause, where you've got this big vacuum, you've got the ethnic splits that already exist within the country, the various different grievances that are currently jostling for position. You've got a big vacuum, not only in terms of governance, but also of information and of infrastructure. So it makes it hard to journalistically to work out what's going on, even when you're as third tier down the sources as we are, and that makes it tricky. And then you've got somebody who has morphed in identity. Literally, Al Golani morphs into Al Sharaa, and ideologically, what is he? Who is he? What does he want? And to what extent does he currently control the country as a whole? Because all of that is necessary to understand, to work out what the threat is to the Druze, and the extent to which he is behind it, or it's a coordinated threat coming from the current leadership of Syria, or whether it's just some of that local opportunism and rivalry that exists among different militia groups within Syria. Very hard to tell at the moment, and all of that is crucial. But what Netanyahu has been saying is that he would protect the Druze, and that is not easy. It might be easier in the former UN buffer zone that you were talking about down on the border there at the Mount Hebron area, because obviously, you've got your own border to cross over to reinforce with. But any kind of military operation isolated in a pocket of this southern suburb of Damascus, this one called Jaramana, is going to be extremely tricky militarily. There's some of the reports I've read question the extent to which the Druze would want that kind of support anyway. So once again, you have to try and understand who wants what and why, and those are tricky questions to answer, frankly.
We have a super chat from Apollo, thank you so much, and a super chat from Bronx Guy Gun Hill RD, thank you so much. Yeah, just maybe a reminder that should have maybe been done at the start, sort of how Syria is looking right now. So Russia still has one military base in Syria. You have in the northeast, you still have the Kurdish forces, the SDF. Or Syrian Democratic Forces. You have Turkey in the north, still sort of even more directly controlling parts of Syria, and still clashing with the Syrian Democratic Forces. I think just recently there was some artillery strike on the Syrian Democratic Forces, as well as I've seen apparently even the Kurds are clashing with in some city in the sort of south of them, and most or formally the Syria or New Syria, which the biggest thing is there is no such thing as Syria right now. There is a bunch of forces in Syria, and technically the transitional, I don't know what they call it now, if provisional government or transitional government, but sort of the de facto or sort of what HTS, who is trying to become government or trying to be the government, is controlling large parts of it, but also you still have militias all over the place, such as the Druze communities in the south that also do have clashes. So yeah, I'm not sure how much more there is to say. I mean, there is a question about sort of if there was an Israeli operation, basically how it should look like. Again, Israel, technically even the Golan Heights are still not recognized as the Israeli territory by the sort of international community. While many countries do recognize, I believe America does recognize Golan Heights as Israeli territory, and Israel has formally annexed the territory. It is still sort of a disputed territory. So now you have even more territory that Israel is holding. And when it comes to sort of what is being justified or what is not justified, then you always have to look at who is protecting the individual rights and what is the sort of I think what is the country that will protect individual rights? Countries do not have rights, especially, even the previous Assad regime or even now HTS cannot claim, I think, any legitimacy as a sort of nation's sovereignty, and in a way is up for grabs. Now, if Israel did try to occupy sort of southern Syria, I think the only question should be sort of, is this in the self-interest of Israel rather than do we respect uh, borders of HTS, or borders of the what is supposedly now New Syria. Yeah, I mean, Marco, anything to add on this?
Well, yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, the borders is not what define the country. A country is an entity which is there in order to protect its citizens. So it should be a free getting together of people who want to govern themselves. So to impose an arbitrary division just based on the race, the gender, or the ethnicity or the religious group is totally invalid. And frankly, I mean, you could argue that, as I mentioned earlier on, 150,000 Druze already are citizens of Israel. Let's not forget the Hezbollah strike who killed some Druze children back in the summer um, in Israel itself. So it's quite natural that the Druze themselves would like to join Israel because they are quite aware that Israel will protect them as citizens, not because they're Druze necessarily, but because they're Israeli. And you mentioned Russia and the base, Russian base in Syria. That kind of links to the third topic, doesn't it? Netanyahu going to talking to Russia effectively. This is because again, Turkey is trying to pressure and put and gain influence in Syria on the new government, whatever that is. And of course, Netanyahu is playing the presence of Russia as a counterbalance to Turkey, which is quite counterintuitive, if you like, because Turkey is part of NATO. Russia is the dictatorial crap hole that actually we know it is. So I don't really see why um, align yourself with Putin at this stage when A, you might not last long, and B, is one of the worst dictators left on the planet. Of course, yeah, the other choice would be Erdogan, which is probably budget Putin, but it's a tough call for Israel because they need to make sure Turkey doesn't exert too much influence in Syria. But frankly, align yourself with Russia, not probably the best idea.
It feels a bit at the moment like you're playing like a game of three cups, where you've got Russia, Turkey, and Syria, and they're all being shuffled around. And the prize, if you manage to get it right under one of them, is just a cyanide pill anyway. So it's pretty grim to look at the prospect of any of these, whether it's Islamist, whether it's the Turkey influence, or whether it's, of course, bolstering Russia, which is only ever interested in the effect and back home in Moscow and what it can do elsewhere. It's obviously not interested in the region per se. I think one of the other aspects that's interesting here is the talk about an autonomous region or an autonomous pocket, as it would be within Syria. Now those things rarely endure, and they're rarely solid, and they're rarely easy to establish, and they're often problematic in terms of disagreements from those that surround, and they're hard to defend, of course. So, and of course, who is going to come forward with sufficient backing of the people that live within the region to determine its existence and define its vicinity? All of that is very tricky to understand. So you may be talking about moving people more towards Israel, more towards that southern border as a possibility among the realistic means of protecting the Druze. And again, that relates to the extent to which people want to take such journeys. All this highlights to me is why Israel is such a rare gem in the region, and why all of the other vacuums and, frankly, disasters all around them represent the alternative to Israel. It's the alternative to supporting individual rights, the alternative to generating prosperity through capitalism and democracy based on freedom of individual rights, that has got Israel to the position it's in. And it's the fact that so many countries haven't learned that lesson and therefore end up with this continual mixture, this continual melee between them, and this lack of control and lack of identity that endures is no real surprise. But it creates a real problem for Israel, which is constantly being forced to look outward to all of the possible countries that surround it. And with the horrible lessons of the past, what could become from a vacuum is something that you need to get in early on if you're going to scupper it, and hence the consideration that they're giving to talking to Russia, which I'm sure under any other circumstances they would run a mile from. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it is presumably what's happening here.
Yeah, now Robin in the chat is asking, Syria is quite big. Would it make sense for Syria to split up into where the factions are now? I mean, whenever there is a sort of the idea of splitting up, or sort of certain parts of a country sort of calling for independence, in modern times it usually is in favor of more statism or more authoritarian. You take Scotland from the United Kingdom. I don't know how popular right now is it for to sort of call for independence, but I think especially around the Brexit era, it was quite popular, and it wasn't sort of to establish sort of like American freedom, like United Kingdom is not respecting our individual rights, so we have to like establish a new country to actually protect it, and it's sort of, even when it comes to this, like I don't think the problem in the world is right now that we have too few countries, or too little countries, that we need more. It's usually once there is a respect for individual rights, once there is a philosophy that again has respect for individual rights, the sort of ethnic rights, whatever you want to make of that, is automatic, because you have respect for individuals. Whoever wants to make up any sort of ethnic group is automatically covered there. But once you start dealing with ethnic groups, which started around the World War One era, or sort of like afterwards, then the same arguments are going to be used by countries like Nazi Germany or Russia to basically, we need sort of ethnic self-determination, means all the same kind of people need to live under all the same sort of regime. And I think that is not the solution sort of out of it. It might be something that might just happen because certain, especially if in Syria there is no agreement between the Kurdish forces and the HTS, then yeah, they'll never be united, and it will be de facto two separate nations, or two separate entities, which again wouldn't be rare for Middle East. You have the Iraqi Kurdistan, so we've already seen this sort of thing happen. But yeah, it's genuinely, when I see splitting of countries, when I see sort of this establishment of new countries based on sort of ethnic rights, it usually doesn't signify sort of we are moving to the better future, or we are moving into the more or freer future. We have a super chat from Bulmus. Thank you so much. He says, Holy Roman Empire, here we go, baby. I think I'm good with that. But yeah, anything, Marco, anything else on this topic, or
No, it just
we can, yeah.
If people listen to what you just said, don't quite understand what you're on about, I suggest read Global Balkanization, the essay Ayn Rand. Not because what you said is wrong or not clear. It's just that it's such a unique perspective that Ayn Rand provides, and explains exactly why it's a mistake to break down on an ethnic basis. That makes it clear, black and white. And again, it's been out there for over 70 years. So it's probably time that we start reading that kind of stuff and realize, we've been lost for so long, and actually most of the answers are there already. So.
And it refers back to topics we've covered in the past about why longevity on a piece of land is not the relevant factor, or why your ethnic similarity with people who look like you or have been grouped together somehow is again not the relevant factor. And yet that's the default that so many fall to, particularly in the case of a vacuum, try and gather together in groups based on geographic area and ethnic identity, and that only leads to exactly the balkanization she's talking about and you're referring to there, Daniel. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and also I think there's a case for maybe we just need less cultures. Maybe we just don't need, my own country, Slovakia, has like, I don't know, 20 dialects. Like, we really don't need this many languages. I'm mostly joking. I'm not calling for cultural sort of genocide or anything in that regard.
And
I don't
also,
know how to, yeah.
and also less pointless animosity towards very slightly different, again, even with the Scottish English thing, very slightly different, but essentially the same. And yet it's the animosity and the difference that's endlessly emphasized by those exploiting, whether it's Brexit, for example, which wanted to separate off Scotland from the United Kingdom in order to attach it to the EU, which is, what are you doing? Whilst claiming that it made Scotland more independent. So it's it's often a tool. It's to other ends, isn't it? The exploitation of the ethnic argument is simply a means of retaining power or autocracy, and using that simplistic percept level identity basis as a means of grouping people together and herding them around.
So let's actually switch around the topic since this is more relating less to the Israel-Russia first, and then we'll do the possibly the breaking of the ceasefire deal in Gaza. So yeah, recently apparently Israel or some Israeli I think diplomats have visited Russia. Recently, something that sort of stood up to me is Israel has apparently been also lobbying USA to basically make sure Russia keeps its base in Syria. The sort of argument being to combat the Turkish influence in the region. Now, also coming from Russia, recently Russia has foiled an Islamist attack on Jewish religious institution and also has jailed 5 people for 2023 anti-Israel airport riot in Dagestan. These things happen pretty much a few days between each other, not to mention something I'm not sure if we have fully talked about, but basically there was the UN vote condemning the Russian aggression on Ukraine, which very importantly, America didn't vote for, but also Israel didn't vote for. The argument usually being used that Israel is trying to sort of, let's say, appease America or sort of keep in line with America. But now that I'm sort of thinking about it, was it more to sort of keep aligned with Russia to basically get a bit of nice words with Russia? Gideon Sar, after the UN vote, has said, we voted with Americans, and I do believe that Russia is the aggressor. We haven't changed our mind, but we thought it is right to give a chance to the initiative of America to try to end this war and solve it by peaceful means. So that would sort of bring in more that it was to sort of keep it in line more with America. But yeah, you have Israel. When it comes to even Ukraine war, Israel has been on the Ukrainian side relatively explicitly, has been helping, has been, I think, even some of the, I think I'm remembering this correctly, that some of the stuff that has been captured in Syria was then given to Ukraine to fight Russians. So pretty much completely in line with Ukraine, even though it is in a sort of unique position. But also Israel is, I think, clearly Russia's enemy through, for example, the Assad's regime, through Iran. And now there seems to be sort of willingness to have some sort of diplomacy, seemingly just specifically to combat Turkish influence, which brings me to one of my favorite point is the curse of mixed economy, or sort of the curse of mixed sort of response to evil, that basically because we refuse to ever actually fight evil, like the Soviet Union in the past, like Iran when it was founded, like Russia now, then we sort of have to ally ourselves with Saudi Arabians so we can fight Iran, or we can keep Iran in check. We have to align ourselves originally with Turkey to combat Soviet Union, but now we have to align ourselves with Russia to combat sort of Turkish influence in Syria. And it really is this sort of nasty thing that whenever I see that sort of there is any relations with Russia, it more than everything, it sort of keeps me disappointing that we refuse to do anything about this and then have to do this like really ugly basically diplomacy, if you want to call that. But yeah, Marco, what do you make of sort of the past, or sort of few days ago or past week, relations between Israel and Russia?
Yeah, well, with the vote on Ukraine, Israel literally killed two birds with one stone, appeased the United States, and at the same time, look good towards Russia. And you're right, every time somebody does something with Russia, it just makes your skin crawl, to be honest. And just look the pathetic attempt of Russia to look pro-Israel. Oh, look at us, we stopped the plot. Really? More likely just an excuse to get rid of some of your opposition, just like they did with Navalny. I mean, anything that Putin says is either a barefaced lie or something designed to obfuscate or equivocate or just playing diverge attention onto somebody else, and just because they really want the base on the Mediterranean, that's the only base that Russia will keep on the Mediterranean. I mean, bear in mind that that allows them to steal and sell Ukrainian grain, going through the Suez Canal and selling to China, whatever, allows them to sell oil, take it to China and then sell it back to us because we are as stupid in the West and as corrupt that we actually do this kind of stuff. So you can understand why Russia is just foaming at the mouth, just thinking, yes, I'm gonna keep this base and do what I want. And they just playing this kind of very childish game. They are so transparent. They're just so pathetic. But if Netanyahu falls for it, as uh, George W. Bush said, fool me once, fool me twice.
He couldn't complete the quote either, could he? I think what is Israel doing at the moment? Is it playing with its relations with Russia? Is it playing 4D chess? Is it essentially trying to keep one of the arguments that you read about is that it's trying to keep Syria weak by not making Turkey too strong within Syria, and the way not to make Turkey too strong is to keep the Russian influence high and conflicting with that. So is that part of a high level game of 4D chess? Is it simply pragmatism, which is certainly it's got to be at least at some level temporary pragmatism, or is it simply the old-fashioned mistake of playing with fire? And it could well be, more than likely that as well. At the same time, you've got the US, which hasn't responded. It was reacted with some surprise to this reaction of Israel to encourage them to allow Russia to keep the base in Syria. Now, the US hasn't responded, but then the US is not very good at playing or even getting the chessboard the right way up at the moment, let alone playing 4D chess. So who knows what they will or won't agree to, and what influence they'll have ultimately anyway. I think the only thing you can say is whatever the situation, whatever game people are playing right now, whichever country is taking whichever attitude right now, it is all temporary. And that temporary is part of the problem, because that temporary is the pragmatism we're talking about. It's not the principles we're talking about. It's a stopgap that often ends up being lasting far longer than originally desired, and we've seen that in all sorts of countries, including Afghanistan and Iraq, in the past in different ways. So it may last a lot longer than desired, and of course may bite you in the arse sooner or later. So you know, when Syria first fell apart, one of the hopes you could see looking at the map and understanding where Russia had this military base, you know, you were thinking, yeah, great, okay, they might get evicted from that and be weaker for it, and that would be a good thing, which I think it undoubtedly would be. But of course, at the same time, you've got the problem of Turkey, and the problem of Turkey being the fact that it's got one foot in NATO when it shouldn't have, and therefore is able to play a minor Russian game of playing both sides all the time, whilst secretly trying to increase its influence all the time, and of course morphing from being secular for a while and more Islamist in recent times, and therefore what's its end goal, and is it modeling itself on what Russia has done in the past? Um, I wouldn't like to be making the decisions about what to do when it comes to this, but I would hope that even Netanyahu is thinking about all of the plans B, C, and D in terms of both that Russian base and relations with both Turkey and Russia in the future, and of course Syria more generally, and that's partly a case of keeping your intelligence fully alert and fully informing your own side in order to make the decisions based on real-time, accurate reality.
Yeah, just on the sort of Turkey in NATO, fun fact, Russia wanted to join NATO. Imagine if they did manage that and we had to deal with that sort of mess right now. Um, um, So something I forgot to mention, also apparently Israel is sending systems to Ukraine for detecting drone attacks, and that happened, I believe, just yesterday. So in the WhatsApp chat, we had conversation about how Zelensky should have played the sort of how he should have acted in the Oval Office on Friday, and that he should sort of take a page from Netanyahu's book about how to sort of handle this. And I guess when it comes to being slimy politician, Netanyahu really manages it well, sort of playing all sides to basically the idea of realpolitik, that there are no principles, there is no right and wrong, there is just something that works, and as long as something works, that is what you are supposed to do. um,
At this point, frankly, if I were Zelensky or Netanyahu, I would involve America in, if I were Zelensky, every single bit of state property, I would hand it over to the United States. So next time Putin attacks, actually, he's attacking United States interest, and I can guarantee you that Putin will not attack under that point of view. That's why if the United States have got access to the resources of Ukraine, Putin would be careful about attacking anywhere near where the interests of the United States are, because they're a bunch of cowards, really. They're just bullies, but they're cowards. So, it's easy to attack Ukraine, but they're very
well,
careful.
not really.
They're very careful about involving the US, and even with Israel, I think they will be very careful. We've seen what Israel has done to Iran. So, but yeah.
And of course, he could also take a leaf out of some of Keir Starmer's book in terms of how he's been using former Tony Blair era politicians behind the scenes, whether that's people like Jonathan Powell or Peter Mandelson, the new US ambassador, who are the arch slimy politicians, and ability to manipulate any given situation, including the egos of those involved. And of course, that's obviously particularly relevant at the moment in the White House. So, but of course, all of that, is a million miles away from being issues decided on the morality and the principles that should be behind making these decisions, rather than this personality based media circus that we've sadly seen.
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Well, with that, as I've said, there is not any solution we are going to give. There are basically developing Israeli-Russian relations, which we might see materialized in sort of Russia keeping its influence in Syria, or especially we'll have to see where even the Ukrainian deal goes, because Zelensky is still willing to sort of take the deal, and if America does really get involved in Ukraine, that might mean something, might not. We'll have to follow that. We are pretty much just waiting to see what happens next, so we can actually have something to cover. But let's go to Gaza. Is something Israel might actually be saying in just a possibly few days. So basically, what has been happening is there was the stopping of aid going into Gaza, which again reminds me of that, Netanyahu might actually be timing this pretty well, because no one in the West is really covering this. Neither the Syrian possible incursion. I haven't seen that much. Like, even the stories I've seen is usually from like sort of like random apologies for the words, but sort of like random news sites, not the sort of the big ones you usually think of. And similar with the cutting of aid, Israel just cut off aid going into Gaza. Now that doesn't mean that basically they don't have it. They supposedly they still have enough to basically go for months without really noticing it. But even that is not really that covered. I think I've only seen like Middle East Eye sort of even covering this, and even that is, I would barely call that a mainstream news, but it's sort of something that is covering this. And yeah, apparently there is a possible deal that's supposedly Witkoff suggested, that basically half of the hostages are going to be released on the first day of this sort of new ceasefire, and then at the end of it, which should be about a month and a half, other half would be released. Now, Hamas has basically denied that they will do anything, they will accept any deal. Basically, they are saying Israel is sort of breaking the original deal by cutting off the aid, because under phase one, there was supposed to be some humanitarian aid going in. Israel officials are saying that Hamas will most likely not release that many hostages and only will release few. So it's basically saying we will not take this deal. And also, apparently, mediators are asking Israel to wait a few more days to basically see if something can be found. So it really does seem that we might actually see invasion back into Gaza, which is supposed to be even more. Something that has been also talked about is that Israel would also cut off water from coming into Gaza. Now I've read that apparently only like 20% of water in Gaza goes directly from Israel, so it wouldn't be that much, but it would still be something. I mean, finally, they would do something. And I think, yeah, and I also have from one of the Israeli security officials saying we are waiting to see what happens in the coming days. We will not let this drag on. So basically, really seeming to push, either trying to project strength to get a better deal, or possibly actually getting ready for incursion into Gaza. I mean, Marco, what do you make of sudden change in sort of the policy? Until now, it seemed that pretty much Israel is happy to just leave Gaza completely.
I just hope behind this all, there is just the need for Israel to receive all the weapons that they asked the United States to provide. The United States.
So I'll just add, apparently the big thing recently was also that they received pretty much all the weapons that have been paused under Biden administration. I think Netanyahu called Trump Israel's greatest ally or something, or dearest ally maybe even, or some really endearing. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I just hope that this pause was caused by the fact that they ran out of bombs to throw at the innocent Palestinians. Frankly, if I were him during the fly past over the Nasrallah funeral in what's this called? In
Lebanon?
Lebanon, yeah, sorry. I would have just pretend, whoops, a bomb fell off my plane and wipe out the rest of Hezbollah. But never mind, he decided not to do that for some weird reason. So let's hope that it's gonna take the fact that the Hezbollah leadership is making more money by taking over and selling the aid that is being provided under the um, terms of this diabolical agreement that should have never been agreed in the first place. But here, this is where we are. So Hamas has been breaking the deal in a number of ways. If anything else, by torturing and providing this kind of gruesome propaganda by every time they release a couple of hostages. And of course, there are still 58 hostages in Gaza from October the 7th, plus another one held there since 2014, I think. And the IDF estimates that up to maximum 24 people are still alive. So this in itself is ground for flattening the rest of Gaza, whether the population are moving or not. This is the point where, enough is enough. There's been retaliation from October the 7th. We've seen how the Gazas have been behaving for the last 20 years, what they've done with all the money that they got from the international community. We've seen what they've done with the money they got from Iran and wherever else. And then they created a war machine. And despite claiming that they are under so much suffering, they're still keeping up to 24 live hostages. And when it comes to releasing them, they're always very, very cagey about it. So enough is enough. Israel should really get rid of this problem once and for all. You just cannot deal with these people. And for the first time in ages, the United States told them, do what you think you should do. And what you should do is just get rid of Hamas once and for all, top to bottom. And we know that lots of the population are Hamas. So yes, there's going to be lots of seemingly civilian people who will perish. But who cares? They are Hamas. There's no way around it.
I think all of this talk about the deal and the next phase gives the lie to the fact that there was ever a phase two in the first place, since it was always essentially marked down as a TBC in terms of anything approaching details following on from phase one. I mean,
Yeah, and I mean, by design, at the middle of phase one, phase two was supposed to be negotiated, and it never started.
Yeah, and by design, by pragmatism, by evasion, by all of those things, essentially, isn't it? And of course, the Witkoff version of it is kind of Witkoff wishful thinking, really, isn't it? The idea that Hamas are going to suddenly give up half the hostages on day one is, for the birds, really, isn't it? Given what they've done so far. I think what's happened is partly what you were talking about earlier was the disgusting spectacle of how Hamas have behaved in these in the way in which the PR side of how they've released hostages. Now, obviously, the taking of hostages is abhorrent and disgusting in the first place. So to focus on the PR it feels like you're missing the point. But I think where that is relevant is the fact that it makes all of those, many of those supporters all across the world who for Hamas, many of those apologists for Hamas, harder for them to face who they are supporting when they see the emaciated hostages, the horrible spectacle of how the Bibas family were treated and how the bodies were released and all the furore over that. The near lynchings that occurred on some release of some hostages, and the psychological methods where people didn't know whether their siblings, their wife, what were alive or dead, or where hostages were taken to see other hostages released but not released themselves. All of that true utter evil is one of the other reasons that Israel has disappeared slightly off the front pages for many of the West. that together with the fact that the Trump administration has sucked the air out of any other media news story anyway. So those two things, run concurrently and end up with the same result, which is that nobody's particularly focused on Israel at the moment, which is, as you say, giving Netanyahu a chance to push back a little. And one of the things that is being spoken about in terms of how he might push back against Hamas is the bombing of these Hamas senior leaders who've been accused of, stealing, accused justifiably, it would seem, of stealing aid. And that would be a good start. And of course, some of the Hamas government infrastructure as well, which, such as it remains, has been mentioned as being one of the targets for further action should it occur. But there's also this hiatus that we've got at the moment. You say we're in a kind of news vacuum as well, aren't we? Whilst they try with a bit of mediation to work out who's prepared to give what, and that just, again, that should never exist. It should be a case of destroying Hamas utterly, and should have been a long time ago. But at least the dial has moved slightly. At least Israel are in the driving seat of their own actions at the moment. I think that's something to be underlined, and that's good for their own future and good for the ultimate decisions they make. But it doesn't mean they'll always be the right ones. But at least it gives them the breathing space to make the decisions that they haven't been able to make under previous, relations with previous US administrations, whatever we might say about the mess of this current one.
We have a super chat from Jonathan, thank you so much. A super chat from Ginger, thank you so much. And a super chat from Bull Moose, thank you so much. He says Middle East Eye is the only news outlet that's more anti-Semitic than Al Jazeera or The Guardian. I haven't read that much Middle East Eye to sort of make the sort of comparison. Relatively, I do like to read it because usually they do cover pretty much anything that happens. So usually it's good, because I don't like to read Al Jazeera. It's good to just get a sort of a little bit of what's happening on the other side. Someone was asking about Severance, the TV show. We did cover it both on the Daily Objective and TV Talk, the show we used to have in the past. So if you just put into YouTube Severance, Ayn Rand Center UK, you'll be able to find both of those. And also, I think Ginger in the chat was correcting you, Marco. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. That's how it goes.
I know. I was monkeying the monkey.
Yeah, I mean, what else is there to say really about the sort of deal? Yeah, we pretty much have to wait to see what happens. Now, supposedly in the upcoming days, we would see the resuming of the invasion. Now, I haven't also checked, but I think Israel still hasn't approved the budget for the year, which they have to do until the end of this month. Otherwise, the government automatically falls. And the big question was, can they get the support for the budget? Mainly because some of the parties are somewhat basically boycotting the government because of the uncertainty if the invasion gets restarted. Both Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich are saying that they would leave the government, or they would not support the government if the invasion does not restart. So I think if this invasion does happen, I think it might mean that Netanyahu will be allowed to basically get his budget through, which would give him time to again govern, basically. With that, Marco, any last thoughts on any of these topics, and where can people find you?
Yeah, I was just thinking about the fact of you mentioned the fact that the media are not talking about Israel. Well, they don't talk about Israel because, especially now, it's Ramadan again. So all the jihadis are too busy causing all sorts of attacks in Israel, and we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to point out that the usual suspect are the people who cause death and destruction. So we don't talk about it. It's much safer. And we only talk about Israel when there is a massive attack. when there is a big, massive, enormous loss of life, just for 2 minutes that it's required to feel sorry for them, and then we start talking about how bad Israel is in defending itself. So yeah, there's lots of that. Talking about Israel and the Gaza situation at the moment is very awkward because, as Richard pointed out, right now we see exactly um, who the bad guys are, and they are clearly the Palestinians. And of course, the 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 Israeli state government tends to be very weird during Ramadan. Do you remember last year all the fuss about let's go into Rafah, let's not go, let's wait, we're gonna go into Rafah, all this kind of malarkey. So I think they are appeasing a bit too much here, and they got a bomb, use them.
Yeah, I don't know how to sum this up other than by how you started, because this is kind of the maybe episode, the what if episode, the who knows episode, and all of that, just requires us to keep watching and focusing and trying to determine what we can from the threads that become apparent to us. And of course, that contrasted with what we think people should do from a moral and practical point of view, those two being the same thing, under the philosophy of objectivism that is so rarely on display in any of this. So we'll just keep doing that, really.
Where can people find you?
So you can always check out the sister channel to this, the Briefly Objective, with short form material taken from the conversations on this channel with added visuals, and the link is in the description below. So please check it out, like, subscribe, and watch lots of the clips. Thank you.
And with that, thank you everybody for watching today. We should be back tomorrow with another episode of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thank you guys for joining me. Thank you again everybody for watching, and bye-bye.
Bye.